Cynthia Brothers, the founder of Vanishing Seattle. Vanishing Seattle is a project that documents the displaced and disappearing institutions, small businesses, and cultures of Seattle. It also celebrates the histories, spaces, and communities that give the city its soul. Its launch in 2016 was inspired by the closing of Inai's Asian Pacific Cuisine on Beacon Hill and its resident stunning, spectacular drag artist, Atasha Manila. What started as a few social media posts grew into something bigger, including this film series, which was executive produced by myself and Martin Tran, and it's an ongoing love letter to the spaces and people that make Seattle an irreplaceably special city. The first film in the Vanishing Seattle series is about Wanawari. Wanawari was co-founded in 2019 by 4 artists: Inye Bokoma, Elishaba Johnson, Rachel Kessler, and Jill Friedberg, and is located in a 5th-generation Black-owned home, which was owned by Inye's grandparents in Seattle's formerly Red Line Central District. Wanawari creates space for Black ownership, organizing, and belonging through art, historic preservation, and connection, amidst increasing gentrification of the Central District, which was once 80% Black and is now less than 10%. By reclaiming Black cultural space and making a statement about the importance of Black land ownership, Wanawari is an active model for how Black art and culture can combat gentrification and displacement.
You scratched my back and I scratched yours like I'm supposed to. When we first met, I told my friends, yeah, I knocked the logo. Up top, pretty thing, Seattle, what a pretty name. She hit me with that city game, looks fresher than the Northwest rain.
Right now, we are in my great aunt's home, which is to say this is the home of my grandfather's sister. It's also the home that my grandparents owned together. My grandparents' generation was a part of the Great Migration, that era when African Americans were leaving the South and coming to northern cities and western states en masse, looking for a better opportunity and a better life, and to escape the violent oppression of the American South. I mean, the Central District was the only place in the city where Black folks could buy property. Because of that, that's where the Black community was, and that was where all of our, religious, social institutions, everything was centered here.
We grew up together. I found solace in your back blocks, alleyways and rap spots, bass heavy off of Alki with your skyline in the backdrop. Yeah, that's what we posed in front of. Now supposedly you pose and you...
I think there's ways that Black people naturally organize that is embodied. Like when I think about this house, I'm from Seattle, but my family's not. My grandfather moved from South Carolina to Chicago and bought a whole bunch of houses that family could live in and rent from, just like Inye's grandfather, right? And it was like this upwardly mobile 20th century thing that Black folks did, right? So it just feels like it's part of our DNA for us to rent the house and then make sure our family of Seattle can come in and have a space here.
Well, I mean, the neighborhood has been changing for the past almost 30 years. Definitely the past decade, things have accelerated the gentrification of the neighborhood. The neighborhood's gone from being almost 80% Black to less than 10% Black. So that's a massive change in every aspect of our daily lives, the folks who lived in the Central District, throughout the 20th century. The community that we grew up in, that we were familiar with, that we helped to create, essentially doesn't exist, at least not in a concentrated geographic way.
We've been talking a lot about belonging and that everybody wants a place to belong, right? And so people knew that this was their neighborhood, they knew they belonged here, and that has been taken from them. When neighbors look at them and say, what are you doing here?
The biggest thing that folks are, attempting to sort of pinpoint are how do we actually survive this? How do we survive it? And then how do we, come out on the other end in some way that feels whole?
As a Black artist in Seattle, it gets really lonely in terms of like trying to figure out where you can share ideas with other people that are like you and actually like push you and see exciting work. I'm really interested in it being a place where people can experiment with new materials and new ideas. And that's why it's really important to have the local, regional, and national artists conversation within the house, right? So when local artists are exhibited in the same space as national artists, they don't have to leave their city to be able to feel like they get to that level of their career.
We need imaginative responses, ways of imagining ourselves in the future, right? That have everything to do with us getting there on our own, in ways that make sense to us.
At times like these, see me for who my neighborhood elders made me. See me for the fire that I am, for the match, the kindling, and the blaze, but also see me for my ash in these trying times. The current state of affairs in our current political climate, in times like these, we have to remember, we will get through this. We always have. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Alchemy Coach, please make some noise.
I'm excited about the ideas of Black artists and how they permeate the world. I've been going to galleries since I was 18 years old, and half the people don't look up at you and treat you like you shouldn't be there. And so I intentionally wanted to flip that experience and make people feel welcome because, like I said, I think artists are the philosophers of our time. And so for us to kind of think about these big ideas that we're all trying to solve in the world, artists are the ones that are going to be tackling those ideas in the ways that like reach us in our heart space. What does it mean to bring people in? What does it mean to use the art as a gathering space? And so I think the house deconstructs that completely. You feel welcome, you feel like it's your grandmother's house, which is what most people say when they come through the door. Wanawari is about making sure the culture of Black folks that was part of this neighborhood is not erased. Because people come back and then they feel like they're strangers in the neighborhood they grew up in, right? So how do you retain culture? And I think that you do that through art. You do that through dance and music and spoken word and visual art and new media. And then people know they belong here.
Decide on what makes you happy. Decide on what makes you full. Decide on maybe if I move you.
This film was directed by Devin Delania and Chimera, who both have multi-generational family histories in the CD. It features music by local artists Yiram Sek and Jess Money. If you'd like to learn more about Wanawari, go to wanawari.org. Hardwicks Hardware is a fourth-generation, family-owned, independent hardware store that up until September of 2020 was located on Roosevelt in the University District. Hardwicks supported boat builders, woodworkers, metalsmiths, artists, tradespeople, and countless small businesses, local industries, and everyday Seattleites for nearly 9 decades. Hardwicks closed and moved out of state as both they and their customer base faced being priced out by a changing Seattle and U district.
You're fine. I'm good at moving through skinny hot areas. Hello? Well, I saw 2 inexpensive routers. I saw a used Bosch plunge router for $49.95, and then I seen a new Skill number 1810 that's going for $79.99.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
I own a portion of Hardwicks, which is also known as Hardwick & Sons, Inc. and it was also known as Hardwick's Swap Shop, and also Hardwick's Hardware by the people out there in Seattle. The store is 10,000 square feet, and it's separated into 3 rooms. 2 rooms are 4,000 each. Of course, the tool room existed before my father bought it in 1938, or started here in 1938.
Well, Hardwick's, amongst all of the woodworkers on the lake, Hardwick's is Mecca. Okay, I mean, that's, when I was younger, I'd save my money up knowing that I was going to spend all of it at Hardwick's. And going to Hardwick's was like, going to heaven. Jensen's has been going to Hardwick's since Hardwick's was founded. And that's where we get everything. I was stoked that they're going to still be online, because I was, what are we going to do? Especially what are the younger guys going to do? Because, I'll be retired here in another 6 years or so, but, you can't buy what you can buy at Hardwick's, you can't get anywhere else, so.
My relationship with Hardwick's goes back a long, long time with Dean and his brothers. My relationship was mainly with Lloyd, who was the store manager. One day he called me up and he said, "Ken, we found a bunch of metric nuts and bolts that we didn't even know we had." And he goes, "Nobody over here knows anything about metric nuts and bolts, so do you want them?" I said, "Well, how much?" And he goes, "I don't know, you tell me." So I went over there and he had literally hundreds of boxes. It filled up the whole back of my truck with boxes. And I said, "Okay, Lloyd, what do you want for it?" And he goes, $100. So I gave him $100, and we still have Hardwick boxes on the shelf from that time on, and that was about 15 years ago.
It was pretty clear that disasters came up, and whichever one of us needed help, we seemed to get it. I went down with a 4-way bypass. They protected my income, even though there was no provision to do that.
For the millionth time, someone said, "Oh, you got to go to Hardwick's. Just even if you don't know what you need, go there, and you'll probably find it." And I went, and I literally walked down the ramp and had another one of those stopping experiences because I saw the desk. I had no idea what it was, and I went up to the front desk, and the super nice cat was up there. I said, "There's a desk back there that I really love." He said, "What's it look like?" I said, "It's black and it's got a bunch of locking hardware on it." And he said, "Oh, Bill's desk." So, he came back and made sure that there was a sticker on it. I said, "Okay." Some things are just soulful, and some things are more porous and collect more energy than others. And this is a thing that had clearly been used a lot.
So I have a long relationship with Hardwick's, and it's just one of those places you just stop in regularly just to see what's new, what's old, what has just come, because it's both used and new tools. You can just find, you never know what you're going to find there, basically. Every jewelry student in Seattle, Hardwick's is on their supplier list, because you're going to find tools there that are going to be useful to you, whether or not they're jewelry tools. The other thing that's so special about Hardwick's is they just have things that nobody else has. I get lots of ideas just from my environment, and I'll just wander around that hardware store and I'll find something that I don't even know what it is. I feel like that's really what's missing with the digital age is that you don't come across things the same way. You have to go looking for them specifically, and you might come across something, but you're also not going to be experiencing it. So I just think there's a lot of inspiration that is lost, and so what's happening is people are just making other people's stuff. So anyway, yeah, Hardwick's is super valuable.
Well, yes, we have something here that we would like to continue, but I don't think it's going to happen, and there's many forces working against it. Most importantly is my customer base can no longer afford to live in Seattle. They can't afford the rents, their property taxes, and they have to sell or just move out.
The property tax situation is really hurting a lot of people. They rezoned over there in the U district for like 9 stories. Dean has to pay a property tax like he's a 9-story building. And the city fathers have pretty much ruined the ability to do business in Seattle.
It takes all your energy out of you, thinking that you have to do so much sales and then you're handing it over to somebody else. The tax increase, no, I can't afford that. They just want to browse around and walk. It's like being in a forest in a way, because the forest, as I'm lucky to have my home out in Edmonds, it's surrounded by about 20 trees, and what it does, it buffers against the sound of the city, and it's actually quiet. Here, it's the same kind of concept. It's like escape from the city. It's like going into a cathedral and having the Blessed Sacrament there. There's a quiet and a peace. There's a presence there that's just different, and that's what I wanted to create here. I'm thinking of the little people, and I'm one of the little people. I'm not a big shot. In fact, I don't make a lot of money in what I do. In fact, sometimes I try to figure out how I can just barely get by. Or for just the sheer existence of the store, or my involvement over the years. I've put a lot of energy into it, and I always wanted to make something special.
This film was directed by Lisa B. Hammond and Derek Johnson, both longtime customers of Hardwicks. You can still shop the store online at hardwickandsons.com and in person at their Post Falls, Idaho store, opening in early 2022. Scandinavian Specialties is the last remaining Nordic-focused retail shop in Ballard, a neighborhood that has grappled with preserving its Scandinavian and working-class history against a backdrop of rapid development and gentrification.
Ballard has a very interesting community feel to it. There's very much the history of the Scandinavian and the fishing village, and I do think people try very hard to keep that alive, and I'm glad that they do.
When I first lived in Ballard, it was very seedy, it was very industrial, and thank goodness some of that is still left.
Ballard prior to 1907 was its own city. Over 100 years ago, when this was a quiet drinking village with a fishing problem, Ballard had that very authentic old world feel. They've been defiant and kind of being their own corner of this city, even as they've been incorporated into the larger city itself.
It was cozy, and all the little dives and shops like Hattie's Hat and the smoke shop and all those, they're just crowding them out.
When we first lived there, you could walk down the streets of Ballard and you could hear Norwegian being spoken. There were Norwegian flags on the sidewalk, and you could go into several different shops and enjoy meat that had come from Norway, fish cakes. It's hard to get used to the fact that the shops in Ballard aren't here anymore. And now there's only Scandinavian Specialties.
Almost out of fish cakes again. Well, we're down to the bare bones, but fish cakes, that is bread and butter around here.
My name is Björn Ruud. I've been the owner here of Scandinavian Specialties for 2 years. The first owner was actually a Norwegian sausage master who was trained in Norway, came over here, started this business in '62, and then my family bought it in 2000 and then sold it to me, and it's been in this location since that time. And I feel a bit of an honor having a chance to uphold a heritage of that sort. I think it's kind of a unique thing for somebody to get a chance at an old world heritage that is very much theirs, and then they get to kind of pass on a history of Norwegians in this part of the world. Legacy culture, and family. My staff is family to me. My good customers who I know, they're family to me. We build that feeling of community here, and that's the centerpiece of this store. That's why I own this business. I'm not looking to get over on anybody. I go to sleep at night really well, even though I sell kind of expensive goat cheese, and it's a family vibe from my customers to my staff to everybody involved. I would like to think that this store has lasting impact and can kind of hearken to this heritage of this neighborhood and speak to it for the future. It's sad to say, unlikely for a store like mine to be successful in 50 years. But I'm also an optimist, and I think that if the story is given, if the story is sung properly, if the marketing between myself, the museum, the Swedish Club, Leif Erikson Lodge, the other clingers on to ancient Scandinavian Seattle can stay in cahoots and continue promoting this thing, and if this can be marketed in the proper way, we can still have appeal.
I would be devastated if it goes away. I want to hang on to some of this.
I remember as a kid, you'd go down to Market Street, and right like kind of in front of Penny's there, all the men would kind of like meet out and talk. It was kind of like a little gathering area. And up north on 15th here, there was Norwegian bakeries and places down there. They'd shop every Saturday.
It's almost like a different town completely. It's just, the warmth and coziness are going away. All the buildings look like cracker boxes and they're all the same color. Ugly yellow and green. And if they're sold, they're tore down and one of those ugly looking places is put in there. It ruins the whole neighborhood.
I think the whole Market and 15th area with the loss of Sunset Bowl and even the Denny's and Louis Chinese restaurant and just the way that whole intersection looked, and now it looks like a completely different city. And I think that's been hard on a lot of people to just see those things go so quickly.
The atmosphere has definitely changed, at least for me it has. It's not, the same.
I got the call on the 17th of May, which is Norwegian Constitution Day, and it's a big day here in Ballard. And I got the call that morning and said, yeah, the property's been sold. No further information. Well, of course it's sold to a developer. Of course, I'll be gone as soon as this, as soon as he decides, as soon as he gets his permitting in place. A couple weeks after that, when it kind of became public knowledge that the sale had gone through, King 5 came in and they did an interview with me here in the store.
Every day, Bjorn Ruud works to keep history alive. But the future of the store is now uncertain, which has left him and his customers wondering what's next.
Apparently enough people saw it, they tracked down who the new owner was and started calling him the next morning saying they were gonna picket out in front of my store and stuff like that. And he came up here, literally as I opened the door, comes in and says, hey, I'm not gonna develop for at least 5 years. I'm not saying that's not part of my future plan, but there's gonna be 5 years of us not doing that. So being able to continue on here in this particular location for at least another 5 years is huge for me, because I don't know if I'd be able to survive or afford moving to another place here in Ballard. You can look at different cultural enclaves in places like New York's and Chicago's, and they may still kind of be able to protect the Polish district in this certain area. But if the market came in and the real estate value was such, it would change.
I think when it happens more slowly, people, of course, are sad to see things that they love go, but it's a little easier to take. When it happens very quickly at the rate that Seattle has grown, it does feel like it's vanishing. It feels like, poof, something else is gone.
I've frequented most of the old parts of Ballard. I've stopped at Louis on the late night. I liked the People's Pub, but now Skoll is there. And I do business with this new beer hall. They buy a bunch of my food for their menu. And so, interestingly enough, even just in the last 2 years, there's been a new source for me to sell my products and something else that continues along the heritage lines of this being a Scandinavian community. I think that kind of indicates that even though we're losing things like the Coppergate and the Viking and, these historic watering holes particularly, the fluidity of change, it's tough to oversing how that all works. A city that's this prosperous is going to have those changes. Yeah, there's market forces at work. There's corporations that are going to come in and buy huge sectors of land. But if the people go to their government and say, this is not what we want to preserve these parts of our city and our neighborhood, that change can often be affected. Ballard is one of the vital historic communities in Seattle, and seeing it preserve that history and then still participate in New Seattle is how it can ultimately hold on to that history and speak to this story.
I think it's important for your children and grandchildren to know that where they came from. Now it's just a mess. That's my opinion.
This film is directed by Cody Lewis and produced by John Evans, both Ballard born and bred. Although it will have to seek a new home within the next couple years, Scandi Specialties is currently open for business and offering a wide and unique selection of gifts, food, and other Scandinavian goods. We're in the Vanishing Seattle pop-up shop in the 8th Generation store at the Pike Place Market. When I first started working on the vinyl wall display, I just had, a pretty small square like this for the prompt. What do you miss about Seattle? And the post-its kind of grew and exponentially and exploded outwards. So we added a couple prompts on either side of the doors, and then as you can see, it just kept growing from there, and every time I come in, there's a bunch of new responses. B&O Espresso, Value Village on Capitol Hill, Louisa's Cafe on East Lake. My favorite part of this is seeing folks come in and have their moment and their time kind of reflecting on the wall, but then be able to talk about it in real time and connect with other people that are in the space as well.
Jogs to your memory.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Crown Hill, yeah.
Yeah, it was really like way up there. Kind of nice. Bakeman's is gone?
Yeah, as of December 22nd, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. And I've had people come in here and, tear up talking about places, and not just places, but, people associated with them or aspects that were very much integrated with their life and their, memories here. But there's also a lot of, good stories and feelings and emotions exchanged too, because for the most part, people have really amazing memories and, good feelings associated with these places, even though most of them are gone. People are responding to specific pictures of places. Like the Red Apple, for example, like this is all filled up in the Chubby and Tubby, yet people are responding to JP Patches, K-Jet Radio, Tubbs in the U District, a picture of the Buckaroo Tavern. One person had a very specific comment that they left about the last night that it was open that said the bikers peeled out inside the bar on the last night it was open, and then someone just came in and was like, oh yeah, I was there, that was Nick, our neighbor. Oh, and Inai's, that's one that I really miss. So that was a Filipino restaurant on Beacon Hill, and there was a server and a drag performer that worked there, Tasha Manila, and she would do this epic one-woman drag show every Friday. But their rent got raised, so they had to close, and basically that's like what started the whole Vanishing Seattle project. Lynx Tackle, Kingfish Cafe, the Harvard exit. They'll write down a lot of places, but they'll also talk about why it was important, what it meant to communities. And they'll also talk about things like affordability and feeling safe and having a sense of community and neighborhood, being able to live close to their family. So what it means to have a good quality of life and have a really, for me, like what it really means to be a world-class city. It's not all about doom and gloom necessarily, or in protest, although yes, it does encompass those things, but there's also a lot of love. So it is a love letter and a celebration as well, and I think people respond to it and interpret it in different ways. The city isn't just made up of a collection of structures and buildings. It's different spaces that allow for community and culture and diversity to happen. This next film shares the stories of artists, nonprofit leaders, and small business owners on Capitol Hill as they struggle to maintain a thriving presence for arts and queer culture in the neighborhood. It features important cultural and social gathering spaces like Cafe Petty Rosso, Northwest Film Forum, and Velocity Dance.
To me, progress is when you see things grow and change in a direction that benefits everyone involved.
I think that progress to the city and progress to us are two really different things.
The idea of progress is probably too often thought of as like financial progress.
True progress means equity.
Well, progress is supposed to be like forward momentum, right? So what are we moving towards?
I always look at the arts, like, are there any movements?
I think that expanding your view of what art is and making it so that different kinds of art can thrive here, not just the ones that you think are marketable, is progress.
I got a studio on Capitol Hill in 1989, about 30 years ago. And I've been in the same studio ever since, which is a miracle in Seattle.
I have been living and working on and off the Hill for 27 years.
So when I first moved here, what I really loved about Capitol Hill was a queer neighborhood, an artist neighborhood, and I loved the different sort of coffee shops and little shops along Broadway and queer-owned businesses and, you know, art stores and like the newsstand on Broadway. And they were just, it kind of felt like this cool little, almost bohemian city.
Capitol Hill was once a place where artists and musicians would come, share their stuff, show their work. There's a lot of music venues, tons of old, really cool, weird buildings, and the rent was affordable. It was really sort of dynamic environment. Lots of different communities felt welcome in that space.
The founders of Velocity Dance Center wanted to open a community space for dancers in Seattle, just so they could rehearse and do work and find community. And Capitol Hill at the time was relatively affordable and also had a big artistic community already in place.
Capitol Hill has always been kind of the place to be in Seattle. There was always a lot of great venues here, a lot of cool artists, a lot of poets, a lot of punks. It was a safe place for freaks, a safe place for people that were different.
We used to have this like haven where if you were in any way feeling like the city was pushing you out, you could come to Capitol Hill and find 18 people who would just immediately like you. And it felt like Cheers episode. Oh, sorry, can I curse? It felt like what Cheers was supposed to be, like where you could just walk up to the hill and you would see like rainbows in the street and be like, oh, I can feel safe here.
In the first few years that, you know, nobody would come up here really, and people would kind of harass you about, why do you have an art studio on Capitol Hill? There's nothing going on up here. It became quickly all artists and all small businesses, and you knew everybody in the neighborhood. There was a sense of community, which was nice. It made you feel part of something.
I think what always brought me back to the Hill was that sense of community. You know, artistic community, gay community, whatever, there was just communities.
There was no money here. There wasn't this influx of people here. And that was the coffee and the cigarette and like the poetry. That was the moment, is like, that was Capitol Hill. It was a feeling.
I started going into Petty Rosso when I was answering phones at Aria, which was a hair salon that was right next door. It was my social group. Everything surrounded Petty Rosso at the time. So when we got the opportunity to take it over, we wanted to keep that. We didn't want to see Petty Rosso die.
It was really fun. That was, in the 90s when we'd be getting calls from Rolling Stone magazine asking us if Pearl Jam was drinking coffee there. So, and we were like, you know, kind of like, oh my God, Rolling Stones calling, hang up.
Places like the old bus stop, Man Rake and Cora, a lot of the nightlife spots that I used to work at and perform at, and you know, we would do things like literary readings there, and like an arts and crafts night where you'd come and have cocktails and do crafting, you know, just fun stuff like that. But that was artistically based and sort of really helped to foster that community that we were talking about.
Punctuation Gallery was also happening, and there's probably a ton of other venues at the time that were really inspiring and inclusive. And those venues started to shut down, actually. And I thought to myself, it might be important to, as an experiment, to get a venue and then to give everyone access to the venue. So the idea of Love City Love was being inspired by these other venues that were all-inclusive, multicultural, hyper-creative, and that seemed to be fading out of Seattle and out of Capitol Hill at that time. The very nature of gentrification and how it works just was crushing all of that culture.
You'd run into people on the street, and you know, sort of like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Sesame Street or something, where you just see people you know everywhere. Now it's just a sea of strangers.
I can walk around in my neighborhood for 2 weeks sometimes and not see anybody I know, which never used to happen.
Capitol Hill's long been a center for cutting-edge arts, LGBT culture, small businesses, in these great auto row buildings. What's changed is it's also become one of the most desirable places on the West Coast to live.
The most obvious thing that's happened is that the amazing cultural hubs that are these really rad spaces and buildings have been demolished, and then these crazy concrete and glass buildings go up.
Private developer bought Oddfellows Hall, and at the time, many arts nonprofits were actually housed at Oddfellows and could not afford the huge rent increase. And so it prompted almost all of the nonprofits to leave Oddfellows Hall to find their other spaces.
I've watched the whole landscape change, you know, I mean, it's changed architecturally, but also the energy has changed and it's become a lot more mainstream.
There used to be a giant thrift store right across the street from us, which is now being turned into like an office workspace. And that's where we would get our costumes. We called it our costume shop. And we would just go in there and we knew everybody who worked there. And that was kind of the last straw for us. When that giant, always busy thrift store, when they were told to leave, that was like the first red flag of like, something is happening to Capitol Hill.
And I think that's the problem with Capitol Hill is they just decided not to have any balance. It was just a free-for-all. And I think the problem with capitalism is that people lose sight. They don't understand that a lot of artists, may only live on like $800 a month.
I think we're seeing a lot more of the corporate businesses because it's just too difficult for an independent person to have an idea and execute it. It's impossible without massive funding. Just the rent by itself is, on average on Capitol Hill, $10,000 to $15,000 a month just for the rent. So how does an independent person navigate that? They don't.
So how do you continue to bring arts and culture to a space that costs $10,000 a month to rent and is all new construction and it's kind of cold concrete walls with glass? That's just not viable.
What is the language, like the poetry? How do you articulate what happened? Like all of the feelings that are almost ineffable, like you don't even know how to like explain the feelings. And I guess that's what good art does, is it explains things you can't put into words maybe.
When we're moving through something or when we're evolving, there's usually an art movement happening as well. And there are no movements. The art movements have become art markets now, which is obscene.
It's the same stuff that happened to hip hop. It's the same thing that happened to punk. It's like these things were birthed out of like really immense struggles of people that felt really, really deep feelings.
Because that's where we question things, right? Through the arts, we question. You're not supposed to accept what is. You're supposed to creatively start to seek what you want.
There was a show that I did where we worked with this organization to procure a house on Capitol Hill that was going to be demolished. This show is about progress, and it was about a brother and sister who are living together in their childhood home, and the sister's mentally ill, and the brother's trying to sell the house, and their mother has died. And the very week we were supposed to be open, we got locked out by the developers. So it was kind of this very sort of meta, like life imitating art, imitating life, imitating weird thing.
Well, we're looking at these high density buildings coming up all throughout town. The ground floors are made for retail that are sitting empty because no one can actually afford the retail. And the developers would rather them just sit empty than work with an arts organization to fill that space. And that disconnect, I think, is one of the fundamental problems.
And that's how colonization works, or how classism works. Like, you know when you're not wanted. It's clear. Like, it's a $6 latte. Get out. You're not wanted here anymore. Or we have to be moved out of 1400 East Pike Street because they want to court Howard Schultz as a client. They want that to be a Starbucks Reserve on 14th and Pike, not a Love City Love, not an all-inclusive, creative, multicultural venue valuing health and wellness.
The way Annex is trying to grow is we're trying to make an ADA accessible space. So we either need to put wheelchair elevator in these stairs or we need to find a new space. But every time we try to like find a secondary space that we can go to do ADA accessible shows, we tell them that we're like a theater company, and they literally are like, well, we don't want a theater company here because we don't think that that's lucrative.
I mean, I pleaded. I tried so hard with 14 and Pike. I mean, they seem like somewhat open, progressive people, and I like would write him these emails of like the future of culture and that, like, trying to illustrate how much power he has over letting us be in the building, and like, would he want to collaborate? Like, what if we're not just the tenant anymore? What if you could see like who we are as like people?
I'm in like ground zero. You know, the 6 months after Petty Rosso opened was when all the construction on 11th. And we were so sensitive at that time. We had no sidewalk for 3 months. We had a massive building getting built across, and then the next one started. And then the next one started. It was like 3 years of construction for us. And there was zero help from the city.
You know, you look back and you start walking around this neighborhood and thinking like what you could have done. And it just feels so big and lonely. And like it all happened without you.
You know, I used to joke that I was nobody in this neighborhood, and then for a little while I felt like I was somebody, and now when I walk around I feel like I'm nobody again.
Individual artists in particular are getting pushed out every day. LGBT seniors are getting pushed out every day, and we could even lose the beloved arts organizations that we can easily take for granted on Capitol Hill.
I don't know how to preserve or retain or sustain the soul or the culture of this neighborhood, because it's so powerful the way money works. Like, it's just so powerful and it's so crippling.
I do think that investment, like really big scale investment on the part of the government, could really help, because I think we need to work in that scale. It can't just be building by building. It's got to be kind of, I'm thinking of it as a whole district, because what I'm seeing right now is that individual artists and arts organizations are kind of doing it, but we, even taken all together, we just don't have that kind of power. So I think if we were able to get that big lift from our state and local agencies, like an even bigger lift than what they're giving us right now, it would really, really be helpful.
What are the kind of interventions we can create, maybe on a city level, to kind of ensure that there's more, or more transparent community dialogue around the structures that go up around us?
The old narrative is, if you want progress, well, then we need to dismantle this, and people need to suffer. That's all life is, right? Somebody is telling a story, and the moment the majority of us believe that story, that becomes our reality. And everybody's always worried about who has the power and who has the wealth. I'm like, who's controlling the narrative?
I feel like the ability to use our voices to tell our story is being lost.
The only way to keep a community going is to be able to have those people be around to support that, you know, and to have places where they can gather and places where they can create their work and find like-minded people.
Can we activate those spaces and figure out a way to work with developers and say, hey, how can we work together to activate these empty spaces? Because they sit empty for months, sometimes years after they build up these big condos. And we really want to think about, can we figure out some, I don't know, tax loophole or incentive from the city or something where there are spaces that are dedicated to art, music, health and wellness.
So I'm very much about artists as activists and artists building momentum together, because we're, generally speaking, so poor and powerless that it does require coordination to move policy change towards our benefit.
You know, what I would like is everybody to be able to come back and support the artists that still remain here. And, you know, my hope is the remaining artists and organizations that are still fortunate enough to have their spot up here can just keep working as long as we can.
And it's not longing for some nostalgic time that once was. It's just that, like, we are really creative. Human beings are really creative. And so why are we settling for this? Why can't we curate the Pike Pine corridor with a lot more soul?
We need more affordable retail. We need more affordable commercial space. We need more artist ownership. We need more artist control. We need a lot more resources. We need particularly government to step up with more dollars to support all this. And there's a way that Capitol Hill can remain the neighborhood that is both desirable and affordable for the rest of our lives.
This film was directed by Angela Bernardoni and Laura Jean Cronin, who've had studio spaces in and deep ties to Capitol Hill. Velocity Dance lost its space during the pandemic and is seeking a new home, while Northwest Film Forum will also be searching for a new location in the coming years. Built in 1962, the Four Seas Restaurant and Dynasty Room Lounge in Seattle's Chinatown International District was a gathering place for people from all walks of life until its closure in 2017. As you can see now, the Four Seas is no longer, but the site is being reactivated and rebuilt to continue to serve community for future generations.
In 1978, I remember I was working the front of the house and I was watching the NBA final, and the Sonics lost in the 7th game, and they were at home. And about 5 minutes after the game ended, I got a call from Zolly Valchuk, who was a general manager of the Sonics. We knew him. He had come down here many times before, and he said, "We're all coming down. Get 3 bartenders. We're coming down in 10 minutes. Click." So all of the Sonics, they had just lost the 7th game, they came down here for dinner. My father, Abe, was one of the original co-owners of the Four Seas restaurant. He and my Uncle Wilbur and my grandfather, they built this place in 1962. And so we were really involved with it up until he sold it in 1988. Back then, people didn't really mix. They didn't go to the same restaurants. They didn't hang out at the same bars. We really had a kind of a segregated town. And the Four Seas was one of the first places where people from all different races, all different walks of life could come down and have a drink.
The interesting thing about Four Seas is that the age group was also diverse. You have people in the middle age at that time. Bob Santos, for example, would come in quite frequently. But we also have younger Americans like Silme Domingo, who's a famous Filipino American in the community, and he used to come here and drink also. What we call regular drinkers, like in the weekend, they would come, they might start at Four Seas, and then they would go down to Hong Kong, and then they would go to Sanya and do a circuit. Because each bar has slightly different clientele, and so sometimes you do the circuit and you see pretty much most of your regular drinkers.
The Four Seas bar, the Dynasty Room, was a de facto clubhouse for politically involved people. Back in the 1960s, you could see Bob Santos and Bernie Whitebear in one corner, and in the other corner you could see Senator Warren Magnuson and his wife. And in the other corner you could see a very young Norm and Constance Rice, the future mayor. But at that time they were young, on the rise politicians. The relationship between Chinatown, the International District, and the Kingdom was a really complex one. Many people in the ID were opposed to the Kingdom. And I had known from a business standpoint, they absolutely wanted more business to come through Chinatown and the International District. On the other hand, they knew that there would be parking nightmares, there would be pressures on the social services, there would be consequences of development that weren't necessarily desirable. And so my dad, I remember he was wearing a couple hats there. He wanted the business, definitely, and he was public about that. But I know that he talked with a number of the activists about some potential problems that come along with that. Do you want just kind of drive-by, people just coming by to have Chinese food and without caring about the people who actually live there?
It's easy to come now and see what's wrong and see the pressures and think this is new, but it's been the same struggle from the beginning, and it's the same struggle that Uncle Bob started when he saw what was happening way back in the early 70s. And the neighborhood's gonna look very different. Maybe not so much in 2 years, but in 5 years, 10 years. There are taller buildings proposed. The concern for me is that they will overshadow the neighborhood that we know and love today and push it out. If not like literally, then either economically with rising rents and rising property values, culturally with influx of new people, new businesses that might not address the traditional population here. So it's a scary, scary time. It's also a time for action. So community-based development, community control of land is key for addressing displacement and for helping the community to thrive into the future. So Interim's going to own the top floors, the residential portion of the building, and the Chan family is going to own the commercial. They're very much committed to uses that will make a contribution to the neighborhood. I kind of assumed that everybody knows Uncle Bob and knows what he's done. But one thing, as time goes on, people who did know him and worked with him were feeling like that this is on our shoulders, like to help people understand just who he was. I keep talking about contributing to the neighborhood, sustaining the community, because we have this vibrant community that welcomes immigrants and refugees and culturally relevant businesses and services and a whole range of nonprofits. And, I truly believe that this community would not be intact and strong the way it is without Uncle Bob's vision and commitment all these past decades. So this project is really coming from the heart.
The previous owners of the Four Seas and Dynasty Room are ready to move on, and they're waiting for development. And in that interim, it's going to be a year to 2 years out. They didn't want an abandoned building in this neighborhood, so they had asked me if I wanted to come in and run a bar. And so while we're here, it's not about how much money we can generate, because I do have other businesses that can pay the bills. It's about how to make the biggest impact in a short amount of time.
Coming in here, even in this modified form, it brings back incredible memories. And a lot of it's changed, but a lot of it's exactly the same. You walk in here and this fake leather on the bar is exactly the same as it was from the time I remember, for as long as I can remember.
I hope there was for the time that we're here, it's a lot shorter time, but we can create a new set of memories for a new generation of people for Dynasty Room.
In this day of technology, where we have the world in our hands, on our smartphones, I think people, as time goes on, people will yearn for more emotional connection in a physical space. My father would love this remodel because it makes people happy. I think this place connects with people, and isn't that what we're all looking for? Connection.
This film was directed by Twin Tan and Ryan Katabe, who founded their creative studio in and have extensive relationships in the CID. Uncle Bob's Place is projected to be completed in late 2022 or early 2023. The sixth and final film in the series is about the iconic Busch Garden restaurant. In addition to being the first karaoke bar in the country, since 1953, Busch Garden has been a hub for connection, celebration, and multiracial, multi-generational organizing. After the historic building was sold to a private developer in 2017, a grassroots fight emerged to save both its history and future as a vital community space.
But I know he usually enjoys it. Since I may not ask Wadasan this year, maybe.
We found out after it was already done, so we didn't hear about it prior to. The beginning, it didn't quite, feel real, and what does it mean? What it would be like to not have the bush? I wasn't sure how to feel about it in the sense of what are we going to lose, the community and our history. Just having that place that can stand the test of time, or has stood the test of time, that we don't lose that.
Seattle losing Busch Garden, what that means. It means that the second oldest Japanese restaurant in the state of Washington closes, that a community resource, a business, a legacy site for the city of Seattle and all of her citizenry will no longer be here. It's irreplaceable. And the fact that it's not being respected by the city, respected by the preservation board, respected by the new owners who think they can put cash down and take whatever they want, is up.
This building has always been kind of a gathering place. It's like there's something about this space that creates that community. When Busch Garden moved from the Busch Hotel to here in 1953, the family actually designed and built all of this.
My father-in-law started it with Fred Hasakawa and his sister-in-law Lillian Tomoda. He had a vision about things, he was before his time. He invented all the recipes and designed the interior and everything. I think it was like a little bit of Japan because we had our waitresses dressed in kimonos, and we had the tatami rooms. We had 40 of them. My father-in-law invented the hole that was underneath the table, and so you could sit down like you were at a chair. And he said none of the Americans could sit down on their legs and be comfortable, so he designed that. And he put a rug underneath, and then we had little cushions that we all sat on. And then the tablecloth covered the hole so you couldn't really see anything. But we had a lot of hanky-panky going on. And we had actually Princess Michiko, who was in Japan now, and her aunt and uncle came. And we had to close up the whole restaurant for security's sake because they wouldn't allow anybody. So we had to make all this Japanese food. I don't know if it was as good as the ones they got in Japan, but they ate it. We had cooks, and we had a hard time getting chefs because the immigration would only let so many people in. They kept saying, well, they're taking away, you know, the jobs from the American people. So I said, how many people here know how to make sushi or make Japanese food, you know? And a lot of the chefs that came over finally got their visas and they opened up their own restaurants. So a lot of the restaurants today are run by people that worked for us at one time or another. We started the karaoke bar, you know, later on in the 60s, and we were the first karaoke to be in the whole United States, actually. And at that time, they didn't have the, you know, key changers and, you know, the video with the words popping up. It was more a scenic video that was on a screen.
We had karaoke here, Japanese karaoke, back, you know, 8-track tapes. You're thinking 8-track, and the menus for the songs were handwritten in Japanese. So if you didn't read Japanese, there's no way you're going to sing. And it still wasn't popular everywhere. So really, in the API community, it was a different kind of world. Here, I mean, how it looks now and how it looked then is quite different. I think now I really like how it feels. People come in, they sing, they support each other. If somebody's doesn't remember the song and they're having a tough time, the whole room starts singing with them. I love that here people have learned the culture of karaoke in a way that, you know, is more of a sharing and supportive way.
Being at Busch Garden meant being not only with some of the best singers in the city and the best drinkers in the city, but also meeting Congress members, city council members, right? State legislators, journalists, artists, activists, advocates, right? And exchanging knowledge, exchanging wisdom, absorbing wisdom and lessons learned, and really becoming a stronger organizer, becoming a stronger advocate. At the same time as you're building community, right?
They started in January, and at that time they said a year and a half. And then as we were approaching the year time, they said potentially it could be, 2 years. There's been a lot of support for us to try and continue somewhere. I'm feeling a little more hopeful and energized about the future of Busch. When the opportunity came up for us to move into the new development, Uncle Bob's Place, that Interim is doing, it was very exciting. I think all of those things were things that felt really good for us, that they want to build a space that's going to be a community gathering space so people can come and share right there on the corner. I think it's going to be really exciting, and that we get to be a part of that just feels like it is in sync with what Busch Garden is now. I feel the idea about losing valuable things in our community, in our city, that there's a part of me that really wants to push to preserve and not just as a museum place to go recognize and see the story, but something that people can come and experience in a very authentic way. But I don't want to lose the neighborhood and its history and the story it has to tell.
First, we prevent every possible aspect of demolition of a place where civil rights leaders that I have looked up to and mentored me for years sang and taught me to sing and had fun and do more than just advocate for new laws.
I oppose the redevelopment of the historic Busch Garden building because the proposed building will not serve a majority of CID residents, immigrants, and refugees in both price and unwieldy scale. I oppose the redevelopment of the historic Busch Garden building because the very soul of our neighborhood is threatened by development such as this.
You know, once you lose the building, Busch Garden building, you're going to lose a lot of history. And it's not necessarily Chinese history. I think the International District, Chinatown, was called that for a reason. It includes a lot of other people besides Chinese people, and we all lived and worked together in the same neighborhood. And I don't feel like erasing 100 years of that history is worth this development.
This film was directed by Ellison Xie, Christopher Woon Chen, and Martin Tran, longtime Busch Garden patrons. Busch Garden also holds a special place in my heart as I consider it my Cheers, a home for both my personal and political development. It's where my parents took me as a kid to eat in the beautiful tatami rooms, and where I later migrated over to the bar as an adult, making lifelong friendships over a big bottle of kirin and a karaoke mic. Many thanks and gratitude to all the filmmakers who worked with Vanishing Seattle, and to the small business owners, artists, activists, and community leaders who shared their stories with us and who truly make Seattle a world-class city. There's so many more stories to tell, so stay tuned for an upcoming second series of Vanishing Seattle films. If you know of spaces in your community that are vanishing, in danger of vanishing, or resisting vanishing, get in touch with us through Instagram, Facebook, and vanishingseattle.org. Thanks for joining.
Come gather around Seattleites wherever you are. And stuck in 520, get out of your cars and admit what they're saying in Wallingford bars. Our lifestyle is fading, and the most livable city is now a parking lot for the town. It is a changing. The food giant's gone, bid the doghouse adieu. And Frederick and Nelson, it's history too. Man, we've got lots of Tully's and bagels to chew. And there's pesto and sun-dried tomato. And you just wash it down with a peach microbrew for the town. It is a changing. Hey, yuppies are taking ballots, they now think it's cool. And they're kicking out the old bots who drive slow and drool.